Hi guys, welcome back to the Criminology podcast. I'm Liz.
I'm Ben.
And today we'll be talking about physical appearance theories. So our first theorist was Lombroso, and he claimed that criminal is a separate species, a species that is between primitive and modern humans. He argued that the physical shape of the head and the face determined the born criminal. Lombroso claimed that you can tell what kind of crime someone committed or will commit by the way that they looked. The component to this theory was that he compared Italian prisoners to Italian soldiers. Criminals had different facial features to the soldiers, and the features that made a criminal included a large jaw, high cheekbones, flattened nose, shifty eyes, handle-shaped ears, long arms, and fleshy lips.
In 1949, William Sheldon advanced Lombroso's physiological theory and claimed that criminal behaviour is linked to a person's physical form. Sheldon claimed that people could be classified into three body types, or somatotypes. These somatotypes consisted of endomorphic, which was fat and soft and tended to be sociable and relaxed; ectomorphic, which were thin and fragile and are introverted and restrained; and mesomorphic, which are muscular and hard and tend to be aggressive and adventurous. Sheldon, using a correlation study, found that many convicts were mesomorphic, and they were least likely to be ectomorphic. This was conducted with others in 1949.
So now we will progress on to the cause analysis of both Lombroso and Sheldon, as their theories both interlinked.
Credibility. Lombroso was the first person to give criminology a scientific credibility. His work heralded the beginnings of offender profiling. Sheldon did find that the criminal groups were more mesomorphic.
Now on to application. Lombroso believed that prisons should be labelled as criminal universities, and this was due to the fact that criminals would talk to each other and discuss different ways that they would better pursue their crimes without being caught. In addition, given today's recidivism, repeat offenders rates this as very perceptive.
Refuting evidence. Lombroso and Sheldon's theories are extremely deterministic, and they assume that we cannot escape destiny and have no free will. Sheldon couldn't explain how ectomorphs and endomorphs can also be criminal.
Supporting evidence. Charles Goring in 1913 found law, order, intelligence in convicts, which suggests more genetic-based criminality. A number of other studies have confirmed an association between body build and criminality. Pouton and Salmons, 2002.
How scientific do you think that these studies were, and do you think that they would stand up as an excuse for crime today?
I don't think so, really, as the theories themselves are very subjective and it's down to the person's interpretation. So really it would be down to whoever was involved, like either the judge or the barristers, who would decide if someone is perceived as mesomorphic. But then you also have the issue if someone is between the different somatotypes. Say if someone is between a mesomorphic and an ectomorphic, would that mean that they were introverted yet aggressive? Or would it mean that they were very restrained but acting quite defensive?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And I agree that the lack of objective evidence for this theory doesn't really give it much support, but I think with the fact that it was one of the earliest theories that was created, I think it was a good example of a reason behind crime for the time. So I think it would have kind of stood up back then, but it's not as prominent now. I think there's other theories that can stand in place, and we've got evidence and we've got more understanding of genetics and environmental causes, which this kind of doesn't take into consideration.
So when these theories were conducted, do you think they wanted to take into account the fact that females could commit crimes, or do you think due to the stereotypes of women during that era, they decided that women wouldn't be able to commit the crimes, and that's why it's so restricted to being used in modern day society?
I think that's a really good point. At the time, it was quite sexist, and there was not many females in prison, but there was a lot of males. So obviously they didn't have the ability to measure whether females were criminals or not because they weren't physically there to be able to be tested. But I think that they needed to take something into consideration, and they needed to kind of understand that male and female bodies are different in build. Even though you can try and label everything at once, it doesn't cover it, so they kind of needed to investigate further. And the fact that they've only taken into consideration one gender of humans kind of divides society, whereas they needed to be inclusive and kind of explain all crime instead of just these people have been violent and they are male and that is it.
Another point to add on to that is the fact that women were supposed to be seen and not heard.
Mm-hmm.
So they may have not been aware that women could commit crimes because they didn't really pay attention to them as people, as they were told not to speak.
Yeah.
And you've also got the issues of women weren't allowed to go out and exercise and become mesomorphic. So for them, they'd be stuck in the ectomorphic section, which would be interpreted and restrained, which relates to how they were back in the time when Lombroso and Sheldon were creating these theories. So like you were saying, because they only use males, it creates a divide in society.
Yeah, and it's biased their results in the fact that women were generally more ectomorphic because they weren't allowed to express themselves. So that's definitely been a bias in their results as well, which needs to be taken in.
So do you think if they actually included women in the tests themselves, do you think that we wouldn't be so set on mesomorphics being the main criminals, but maybe edging towards the ectomorphic?
Yeah, I think it's there could have been like a near 50-50 split. I personally don't think that this theory is kind of inclusive of anything, and physiological theories just going on how people look doesn't work. I think there's a deeper thing to it. There's environmental considerations and genetic considerations which you have to take in, and I don't think, even though your genetics obviously define how you look, I don't think that's the true reasoning behind crime. So I don't think that any of the results that are found in these tests would work personally, but definitely it'd be very close between all of the different somatotypes if they considered everybody instead of people that are just in prison. Just anybody in general that has ever committed a crime, even if they've gotten away with it, I don't think the results would ever be.
Yeah.
I think there's another thing with bias when people are being put in prison, if they look like criminals. We've all got this image of a criminal. If somebody looks like a criminal, you're going to have a more biased effect on whether you want to put them in prison or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's also affected their results. And I definitely think that more mesomorphic people, as Sheldon and Lombroso describe it, would be put into prison at the time because they look like criminals, because that's what people think criminals look like, whereas somebody that's ectomorphic would get away with it because they don't look like a criminal. Thanks for listening to the Criminology podcast. I've been Ben.
I've been Liz.
See you again next time.